Welcome to the GCN Racing News Show. On the show this week, we discuss the new and finalised UCI race calendar and ask whether it really is the most hectic race calendar in history. We also have on the show a women's Paris-Roubaix, contract news, talk of a potential new venue to host the World Championships, and we hear from AG2R coach Stephen Barrett about how they are managing their riders during this time in their preparations for a new race calendar. Now you may be wondering where Dan is. Well, he is busy presenting our coverage of the Giro d'Italia classic stages over on the GCN app. If you haven't checked this out already, I would highly recommend it. 21 classic legendary stages of the Giro d'Italia spread out over 21 days. It's as if the Giro is actually running, but with just the best stages for you. We've got new commentary, punditry, exclusive interviews, polls, quizzes, all on a live and daily show. So you can forgive Dan for being a little busy. And I know I didn't ride for Cervelo Test Team, but well, I did once ride the Giro myself. I'm not sure actually if I told you that yet. I've been looking at last year's Giro d'Italia road book for some inspiration. There was many climbs, as I remember. We better get started anyway. A lot of news to talk about today, and we are going to begin with the new men's and women's UCI calendar, which was announced during the week. Starting on the 1st of August with Strade Bianche, the racing will be quick fire with Grand Tours, major classics, national and world championships all crammed into 3 months of hectic racing. Perhaps the biggest takeaways are the overlapping of the Vuelta, the Giro and Paris-Roubaix on the 25th of October, giving rise to one impressive day of racing, which some are nicknaming Super Sunday. It's kind of like cycling's equivalent of the Champions League final or the Super Bowl. It's a mouth-watering prospect though as a fan. The Queen stage of the Vuelta, the final stage of the Giro and the cobbles of Paris-Roubaix all at once. How are we going to choose? How are the riders going to choose? It's going to be a headache just to decide where they'll actually race. However, there have been some cuts to the programme with some major races not finding a spot. Notably, the men's and women's Tour of Britain, highlighting the difficulty of rearranging a season-long race calendar in 3 short months. Now, there are obviously much more important matters to solve in the world before this programme even becomes a reality. But having these dates written down definitely helps everyone involved in the sport plan and work towards the running of these races, if the global situation does allow it. But I do hope it all comes together. It will be an interesting prospect, seeing the Vuelta, the Giro and the Spring Classics run during mid to late autumn. And also don't forget the Tour de France coming so soon in the programme in September with only 4 weeks racing beforehand. Will we see a shake-up in GC contenders as a result of such different preparations? I actually caught up with AG2R coach Stephen Barrett to see how they were managing their riders during this time and how they are preparing for this new UCI race calendar.
So it's sometimes difficult to manage motivation. So I think for us now, we're beginning the process of setting out aims for our riders in terms of race programs, key objectives, and that just gives professional athletes something to aim towards and something to train for. I think as athletes and as professional athletes, that's what they crave. They crave a purpose. So we'll try and give our riders a purpose as soon as possible, so that then they can see anytime what they're doing in terms of training, in terms of preparation, that there's a reason behind what they're doing. So a lot of our guys now will have kind of we would have used maybe some sort of a wave periodization in the last few weeks where we didn't do any big blocks of training and we didn't have any big blocks of recovery. We would have maybe small blocks of specific work, combined with small blocks of recovery. So right now we've got guys who are still in good condition, but they're also very, very well rested. So now we'll begin the process of ramping things back up again, as you would do in the pre-season. It's kind of, we're almost akin to now, it's almost been in November before the season starts. So our guys now will start to slowly build back up volume. We start to add in some intensity, some specificity as the weeks go on. But what's good for us now is, okay, we got 12 weeks to lead into the first races, and our guys will hopefully be good to go come the 1st of August. I think a lot of riders will see the benefit that the indoor training has done for them. I think when you look at indoor training itself, I think we often view it only as something that we do if it's too cold, too wet, or too dark outside. I think now professional riders have a better sense of how it can be used as part or in combination with our normal training program outdoors. So to follow that point on, I think that online races, I think they'll become actually quite a important part of riders' preparation, because when you think about it, we won't start beginning to race in August. So, guys won't have raced for a long period of time. So I would suspect that we'll see a lot of professionals will be using online racing platforms in the months of July and August, just to fine tune that they're racing, not their racing craft, but just the racing mentality. I've spoken to a lot of guys in the past few months, and they just get that sense of it's not so much the physical aspect that they're worried about getting back, it's that racing instinct and just having those nerves and having that ability to find something deep within yourself when you need to go and race. So I would suspect a lot of riders will continue to use some form of indoor training as a addition to their normal training plans.
Some super interesting points from Stephen there, especially the increased use of e-racing to substitute racing in June and July. It's not something we've seen before. We've seen e-racing rise during this period of lockdown, and it's going to be interesting to see how professional racers use it to prepare for races that are out on the road. I mean, one thing is the fact that I'm never going to win a Zwift race at this rate, am I? It's impossible now. Anyway, buried in that news of a new race calendar was the exciting news that we're going to have a women's Paris-Roubaix. Finally! It's only taken about 124 editions of the men's race. Good news though, and either way, it's going to be exciting to see who actually takes the win in that one, I think. In other news, Spanish newspaper Marca reported on speculations that if the World Championships couldn't be held in Switzerland due to COVID-19 concerns, then an alternative venue will be sought. And Qatar, Oman and the UAE are the forerunners, with a possible date in November. Could be a good option if I think about it, because, well, you're not going to have as much of a problem with crowd control, and, well, it might give authorities more time to plan and decide if the event is actually possible to run. But we do cross our fingers for a Swiss World Champs first, and we hope that that option is the one that stays on the table. We also discovered that Mathieu van der Poel's Grand Tour hopes have been postponed another year. The Dutch super talent was hoping for a spot in a Grand Tour this season with his team Alpecin Phoenix. However, organisers confirmed that no further spots would be available after previous speculation in the media. Speaking to Belgian paper Het Nieuwsblad, the Dutchman simply said, "It is a pity because it could have been a perfect fit in this quiet year." Van der Poel is now said to be going all in for the one-day classics, a fact I'm sure that most of the peloton are thrilled about. Contract news now, and despite the lack of racing, UAE Team Emirates have re-signed Tadej Pogačar through till 2024. Great news for the Slovenian climbing talent and also for cycling in general. That a World Tour squad is signing riders at the moment shows that there is long-term health in their team and that the World Tour squad's future is secure, a fact we are very happy about. We also saw World Tour racing on Zwift last week, which was available to watch live on the GCN app. The Zwift Tour for All saw fantastic racing over the 5 stages. Louis Menches took the win on the final stage up Alpe d'Huez Zwift, sealing the overall win for his team NTT Pro Cycling. And in the women's racing, Ashley Moorman took that final stage victory up Alpe d'Huez Zwift also, with Team Sibco Silicon Valley Bank taking the overall victory. And I think the highlight for me has definitely got to be the rider cam shot, seeing everyone suffering whilst taking part. I especially like the view of Israel Academy rider James Pickley racing and suffering whilst everyday life continued in the background. It looks like cheese being grated there, or maybe a sandwich being rustled up. Either way, I hope they made one for you afterwards, James. Now, yet again on the Racing News Show, we're talking about this shake-up to the UCI calendar. And as I've already mentioned, there's the prospect of Super Sunday, with Paris-Roubaix, the Giro and the Vuelta all currently due to take place on the same day, October 25th. I'm sorry for saying it, just gets me excited every time we talk about it. There have been a few dissenting voices though, saying that having 3 races as major of these clashing is robbing riders of the opportunity to take part in 3 of the biggest races of the year. Forcing them to choose isn't an ideal option, but I've put the GCN stat nerds to work and they went off and checked to see how many riders actually took part in all these races last year when they did have a choice to ride. And guess what? Only one rider took part in Paris-Roubaix, the Giro and the Vuelta last year. It was Italian rider Marco Mercato riding for UAE Team Emirates. So I guess these kind of complaints are a little bit unfounded. Although, having said that, there were plenty of riders who started 2 of these 3 races last year. For instance, 35 riders took part in both the Giro and the Vuelta in 2019. But now in 2020, if the calendar stays as it is, no rider will be able to do so. An unfortunate pickle, but one which you eagle-eyed historians of the sport will know is not new. This will actually be the 8th time in cycling history that the Giro and Vuelta will overlap. And if you're a relatively new fan of bike racing, it might seem that the 3 Grand Tours have occupied their current slots in the calendar forever. But in 1995, the UCI calendar underwent its biggest change since the changes we faced with this year. The Vuelta moved to its current August-September slot with the first edition after its move, won by the French all-rounder Laurent Jalabert in dominant fashion. But before this edition in 1995, the Vuelta used to take place across late April and early May, which meant it ended very close to the start of the Giro. Sometimes only a couple of days before the Giro started. And in some years, both races overlapped, with the last of these overlaps coming in 1986. So, not being able to ride the Giro and Vuelta in the same year is nothing new. But with this new mad calendar we're faced with for the remainder of 2020, well, it did get me thinking of the possibility of some crazy exploits. How about this particular craziness from Jacques Anquetil? In 1965, in an effort to win the hearts and minds of the French fans, who always seemed to adore Raymond Poulidor instead of him, he competed in the Dauphiné Libéré, the 8-day mini Tour de France, and won it with the final stage finishing at 3 p.m. Then he dashed to the other side of France to take part in Bordeaux, Paris, which started at 1:30 a.m. Well, guess what else? The race was 557 kilometres long, and guess what? He won that too. So what crazy exploits could we expect when racing resumes? Well, anyone complaining that they can't ride both the Giro and Paris-Roubaix is lacking ambition, if you ask me. The final stage of the Giro is a time trial, so if a rider plans to finish near the bottom of the GC at the Giro, and they could do this if they ask for the help of either myself or Dan Lloyd for some tips. It's relatively straightforward. Well, if they did finish at the end of the GC, they could bag themselves an early start for the time trial, then hot-foot it over to Compiègne for the Hell of the North. Problem solved. And guess what else? There's also the mouth-watering prospect of taking part in Tours de Flandre on Wednesday, the 14th of October, then flying to China to ride the 6-stage Tour of Guangxi, then flying to Belgium for the 3 days of Depana the next day. I mean, if anyone wants tips on how to manage that one, they could ask Chris Boardman. He once got into a breakaway in the Dauphiné just so he could get to the finish line quicker, because well, he had a plane to catch. Chris, it's called getting off in the feed zone, having the taxi pre-booked, and then you're home. Promise, I've never done that one before. Now, as I said earlier in the show, don't forget to head over to the GCN app and tune in to our Giro Classic Stages coverage. We have a stage up the Mortirolo this week, and also that win from Michael Rogers up the Zoncolan, where he punched a fan en route, which is amongst one of my favourites. We're also running a quiz alongside the coverage, and the leaderboard is taking shape. After the first two stages, we have KW Zomerdijk in the lead, with Pete Garnett following closely behind in second place. That's one GC battle that I am going to follow closely. On next week's poll, I'm asking you which of these races you're most looking forward to in the UCI's new and updated race calendar. Is it Strade Bianchi in August, the Tour de France in September, an autumn Paris-Roubaix, a late autumn Vuelta a España, or are you most looking forward to a post-Tour de France World Championships? Remember, the World Championships is coming only a week after the Tour de France. It's an interesting prospect, I feel. Download the GCN app and get voting, everyone. I'm really interested to see which race everyone is looking forward to most in this new calendar. And that was this week's Racing News Show, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my first time on the show. Now, I'm off. Work done for the day. Are we rolling? Yeah, we are. Right. Welcome to the GCN Racing News Show. 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 Welcome to the GCN Racing News Show.